All right, I think I'm good to go. Just make sure I got my chat up. So the point of this right now was I wanted to work on kind of a blog post about integration events and how that pertains or is different than domain events. So that's what I'm going to work out some code around. Let me just make sure that everything is running right now fine. Appears so. All right, so what I have up is kind of a sample project that I've been working on. It's just on my GitHub. It's called Luigi. Basically, it is a kind of a dispatcher for commands, queries, or events. So I'm going to use it as kind of my implementation test of creating domain events. So I guess a little bit more on that. What my blog post would actually be about is the point of the post is I think there's maybe not confusion, but at least I was confused very early on. So I thought it was helpful to point the differences between integration events and domain events. So in this particular case, I wanted to focus on domain events because I think they're a little bit maybe less known than integration events. I think people probably recognize integration events more, which are if you are publishing an event to a message queue or some service bus, any message broker that you're going to be picking up in a separate process and handling completely separately. Versus a domain event would be something within the same boundary. So if you were to think of that as a bounded context or some service boundary, where maybe you have different aggregates and aggregate routes that you need to communicate between them, but you want to do it in process, and a little bit farther than that, potentially within the same transactional unit. However, that's a little controversial. It should be controversial because I usually view an aggregate as like a consistency boundary, as a transactional boundary, and not having multiple aggregates essentially communicating via domain events, but which is kind of funny that I'm bringing this up because what I'm about to implement probably isn't the greatest idea, but I still think it's worth mentioning because I know people advocate it. I'm still not sold on it. I would rather have the boundaries, the consistency boundary of an aggregate route and deal with eventual consistency and pushing a message asynchronously to a queue and having another aggregate deal with that, even within the same bounded context or service boundary. But anyways, domain events are, again, in process, in the same process, and potentially what I'll implement is even within the same transaction. So I'm going to start this off with, I'm going to implement this with Entity Framework, actually, since that's what I can only imagine most people would be using. So let's pull up NuGet. And let's just pull in the latest, maybe not 5, let's go to 315. So I'll pop this in there. And then I'm also gonna I'm just gonna use the in-memory provider, wherever that's at, in memory. 315, this one. All right, so those two. Now what I'm going to do, why is this missing a package? Oh, DI is different. That's going to probably be the same one, 315. Can we guess? Yep, all right. So now that I'm up to date again, let's add a new class, and I'll call this domain entity. So what in the heck is this thing gonna look like? All right. So let's first, I'm gonna create an interface that, call it, that's just gonna represent probably a base class that I'm going to create that your entity framework models entities would extend that abstract class. So this actually is going to be an abstract class that's going to implement this one. And the thing is that the idea here is going to be that this domain entity is going to provide a means to raise events and then to be able to pull those events out and then to clear those events. So those would probably be the three things that I have. Is I'm going to have something like a raise event method, and I already have an iEvent interface that I've created. So let's just call this event. I'm going to need a way that in Entity Framework, I'm going to be able to pull out these events that have been raised. So let's just make an enumerable of iEvent. Let's call this, I don't know, get events. And then lastly, once we've pulled these out of Entity Framework, we want to clear them in case you do something after the fact and save again, because we'll see where they implement this in the save. So we'll have a void clear events. So let's implement all these. So the way this is going to work is let's create a private list of iEvent. Call this events. Let's make it new right off the bat. So when we raise one, we're just going to add it. Better make that private or read only. This is just going to return our events, and this one will just clear events. All right. Oops. Okay, so we have this interface iDomain entity. We have this abstract class domain entity that we are going to create our own entities on top of. So let's create something. Let's put something in our tests here. So let's create a new class. We'll call this domain entity test. Just got somewhere to add it. So let's create a, I don't know, what could I write a test with? What's your typical, something you would create within an entity? A product, a customer, an order. Those are kind of always the samples I use. Customer. So our customer is going to implement our domain entity. Let's see. Let's do. So it's going to have a customer ID. What's some behavior we can put on here? Like a discount, or like if they're a preferred customer. Let's do is preferred. And then we're going to have some behavior. Let's call this public void preferred. So that's going to do the is preferred is true. And And then what we'll do is, this is where we're going to raise an event. So the idea here is that when a customer is deemed preferred and that action is taken out, we may want to let some other part of the system know that they've been preferred. Maybe in this case, it's going to be within this kind of aggregate. So say we had some other, I don't know, like say this was all within our loyalty program or something like that. I'm just making this up. But the point being is that we want something in another aggregate that is going to need to pick up on that this actually happened. So I'm going to then have a class called, we'll call this an iEvent, and then we'll put in it the GUID customer ID. We'll just leave it like that. We could probably put other stuff in it, like the date, if we had any other extra metadata, but keep this simple. And then what we're going to do, let's say that if the, actually let's put this, if the is preferred is false, then we're going to do it. So now we're going to raise an event of a new customer is preferred. Customer ID equals customer ID. All right, so when we call our behavior of setting customer preferred, if they aren't preferred already, we're going to set them to preferred, and then we're going to raise this customer is preferred event that we can let something else know. So again, this is our pretty kind of slim event here. Now I'm going to need to create, so let's create, I guess I got to create a context first too now, an entity framework. So let's do, I don't know. Context. But what I want to do is, let's do db set customer customers case. What goes in here? Options. What is it again? DB context options. Context options of this. Because I need to pass these in because I'm going to use the in-memory provider. All right, so we're moving along. Let's actually move that just in another class to make this easier to look at. All right, let's move this out of here. All right, that's good. Now, what I actually want to do is, in order to, so we have this, let's close this. We have our domain entity that we're raising events. Now we need to be able to get these events out. And where we're going to do that is when we actually save changes in entity framework. So in order to do that, what I actually need to do is override save changes. So let's do save changes async. We'll just do it here for the sake of simplicity, I guess. All right, so how's this gonna work? So what we're gonna wanna do is we need to get these out. So if you look at our change tracker, what's that called? Entries. And I can look for iDomain entity. Is that enumerable? All right. Then what we can do with this, we can iterate over these, and then we can pull out the events at this point. So it's dot entity get events. Oops. Events. All right, so now we have our list of events, and then we can go through those. I hate having to use the word event as a keyword, hence why you have to put the @ if anybody's curious. Just escape it. Oops. And at this point is where I could actually publish the event, which means I need to pass along our iDispatcher. So the iDispatcher in this case is, if you're familiar with the Mediator project, what I've created here in Luigi is a very similar thing for just doing all my live streams. So it would be like Mediator publish of an iNotification. This is the exact same idea. So here I can publish an event. Now, this is gonna be weird. And I know this isn't gonna work as this, because this is an I event, and this thing's expecting it to be an event of T. This is gonna be weird. We'll see if this works. All right, then we're going to save changes. All right, so I got my DB context. So the idea being now is I'm going to be raising events, and then when we call save changes, it's going to emit this event. So let's do something meaningful with this. Okay. Do I got to? I didn't really set this thing up yet. I probably gotta give it. I didn't really configure it. Let's do that. I'll do it in here. Okay, so. I don't even know what to call this yet. I just want to create it. So I'm going to create a service collection. I'm going to add Luigi. Type assembly. So again, this is just a part of Luigi. What I have is it basically just pulls through all of the assembly. It looks at the assemblies that you're passing and then looks for all the relevant handlers. It just does all the registration for you. So Juan ZK is asking, what am I programming? I am programming kind of a little sample that I'm creating for an example of the differences between integration events and domain events. And the example I'm creating right now is how you would implement domain events, which are, again, in process to communicate within the same service boundary, or if you want to think of it another way, as if you're into domain-driven design, within the same bounded context. So I'm doing this as an example for a blog post that I'm writing, or probably even a separate video, but I can't even say I'm a proponent of what I'm even doing right now. I just want to create an example of it. That's what the live stream's for. So now that I have that, the service collection, I gotta add entity framework, don't I? So that's going to be my customer DB context. And I need to connect this thing. How am I going to connect this thing? DB context builder options. Okay, so Okay, so this is interesting. I'm going to make this scoped, because the way scoped is going to work is every resolution within the lifetime of this is going to use the same one. So this, if you could think of scoped as like if you're using an HTTP request and you had to do multiple resolutions of this customer DB context, you're actually going to get the same instance. Which means if you started a transaction, every instance, well, it to be the same instance that's used in different places that were injected are essentially using the same transaction. So we got service lifetime, and then I want to do, get out of my way, what's the options here again? Context lifetime. I want to configure it at the same time. How do I configure it? Inside this. Actually, I could probably get rid of this. And let's just do it here. So I'm going to pass in some new DB context options for this. Actually, it used to be a builder. DB context options builder. Use a memory database, and we'll just call this demo options. Okay. So that's configured. We got our DB context created. Let's resolve it, or create the provider. So got that. Customer DB context. Let's create one of these. Let's add one. So now I'm just going to create my fake customer. Customer ID equals. Let's create a new GUID. So here I'll actually call preferred, which will set it to true. And then we will do DB context dot customers add a sync, and then we will do customers and then DB context dot save changes async. All right, and then this is what's going to trigger us publishing that event out. So, which is going to fail miserably, because what I want to do now is I want to confirm that we have that event actually is handled. So we need to create now a handler. So we close this. Here's my customer, my preferred event. Let's do a handle for this. Event handler, customer is preferred. And let's do something like, I don't even know, what could we do here? I guess we can just make some static here if it's been called. Oops. All right, so I'm just gonna have an event handler that's gonna deal with this customer preferred, and then what it will do is just set this has been canceled to true. So, and all that will be done again in process. Even though it's async await, it will still all be within the same thread, or it'll come back to this thread anyway. So let's do event handler. Oops. should be true. That's what should happen. Let's add a curiosity. Set that to false. Let's run this. I don't even know where that was. Oh, there it is. All right, should be true, but was false. Let's see if this is actually working now. All right, so it is calling it. So now let's do something. So this is full-blown working, surprisingly. The caveat here now is that you could have, while after save changes happens, or actually this is happening before save changes. So I guess it depends where you actually wanted to call this. If you had something like, it would be a little bit problematic if you had your keys, like your primary key on your domain entity, if that was being generated by the database, it wouldn't be populated until you called save changes. In this case, I'm using something that is generated by the client with the GUID, so it's not a problem here, but it would, where you put this would matter, kind of depending on your situation. So, but either way, the still idea being here is that I'm calling this when we are going to be saving changes, which means that depending on the registration of why I mentioned this, is this scoped, is that it's going to be the same instance. So it meaning if I were to inject the customer DB context here, and let's say we did let's do I'm trying to think, I don't remember how you do this in here. Database, current transaction. All right, let's do that. And then let's do database.begin transaction. So I'm starting a transaction in my test. When I save changes, this is going to get called, and I'm going to roll back the transaction. So what I should be able to do actually here is we can confirm this is actually using the same context by, let's do db context dot customers dot a. Can I do that? Any async. Oops, gotta wait this, that's why. This should be false. So, yeah. Take this out. This should fail because this should be true because we will have one customer in here. Which it's not. Oh, I probably can't do transactions in memory. Yeah, wow. So much for that. How quickly could I do the... Let's try SQLite. Here we go. Let's pull this one in. so I'm going to switch this out since in memory doesn't support transactions. Use SQLite instead. Just going to use SQLite. Connection string. Trying to remember how this works. Is it like memory? Something like colon memory? Connectionstrings.com. Data source memory. That should work. That was close. Data source memory colon memory. Okay, so let's use that. All right, let's give this a try. Oh, I gotta ensure it's created. All right, let's do DB context. There's my test set. All right. No such table of customers. Why is that happening? No such table of customers. Interesting. Sure created. Where am I actually getting this at? I gotta map it. Visit customers. This doesn't work all. I don't know why that's not working. It's gotta be obvious here. No such table. Customers. That's what I'm creating. Weird. Oh, so it is looking for it. It's good to know. But it's not finding it, and I'm creating it. Why is that? Let's look at core SQLite memory. Use SQLite. Create in memory. Ah, I see. That's interesting. Okay. That's interesting. So they got a connection. All right, let's do this. And then exposing it. give this a try again. So now, actually I gotta put this. So this is gonna be calling create new memory database. All right, so we're actually creating the connection, opening it. I don't know why it wouldn't work the other way. Hope for the best. All right, we're running, thank you. Thank you to samples and docs. All right, so now if we roll back, this should pass. Which it does not. So we got starting a transaction, we're adding it, we're saving it. Do we make it scoped? It is. Rolling back. It should be false, but it's true. Well, that's interesting. Let's do, let's check if we get the hash code, maybe context. Curious what this is. Here, and then here. Let's see if it's the same instance. All right. Oops. $552 2303 3023. It is the same instance. I don't know why that rollback's not doing anything though. That's interesting. So it is the same instance. So why does a rollback not do anything? It's just straight rollback. There's nothing else to it. All right, let's try something different. Let's add it. We'll save it. Then we will change it. Let's do this. And then let's get our customer out. Actually, it's probably, oh yeah, actually, if I refetch it out, it should be false again here. If I rolled back, because we didn't save. So let's do, yeah. How is it not rolling back? Begin a transaction, roll back. Let's put this as, see if it's changing it at all. Give it one more try here and see if this works. Yeah, it's no matter what, it's not rolling back. I don't know, something's up. It's the same instance, but I'll screw around with this a little bit more. But the idea being, if you get lifetime working correctly, the idea being is that the context that I'm creating here, that I'm working with inside, for example, whatever code it is, the moment that you call preferred and then you call save changes, this save changes is ultimately going to invoke this particular event handler because this is the event we emitted. And then from here, if I had lifetime working correctly, this would be the same instance, which then you could, whatever you did with this instance would also be a part of this ultimate transaction that I had within here. So yeah, if this was like something a part of this, like this, the moment that I call this save, it's going to invoke the other stuff, and then I'll finish on the outside. So this is wrapping everything that's ultimately getting called. So that's how I would implement domain events. Is like this. Having said that, I guess we can do the new way of doing it. Having said all that, the second piece of this puzzle is the difference between this and integration events. So I've done a little bit of that already with this project. I can probably show another illustration of it, maybe using Kafka or RabbitMQ. I did it a little bit with the CAP project. I was kind of showing that with the outbox pattern, and that would be what you'd be using for integration events. But anyways, I just wanted to kind of stream to just work on some code so I can use in my code sample for my blog posts. I do ultimately have to figure out why that rollback's not happening, because that's kind of was my purpose of doing this. So you could see it was all part of the same transaction, or if something failed in one, it affected everything, this entire block. But anyways, streaming, that's the way it goes. I don't want to hang this up forever. It was just more to kind of illustrate. So that is the stream. If you had any questions, let me know in the comments. If you're interested in me doing one on integration events to stream, either way, eventually when I get the blog post, it will also be in the comments in the description of the video. So that is it. Thanks.